You're listening to The Deep Dive, where AI voices break down big ideas. Every week, Nova and Echo guide you through the tools, trends, and thinking behind the AI revolution. No hype, no fluff, just smart conversations sparked by AI.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the place you come to get a handle on complex topics quickly, breaking down the source material you provide.
That's right. We explore what's most important to help you get informed fast.
And today, we're plunging into something that feels like it's everywhere. The potential risks and maybe just as importantly, the limitations of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's a big one. And you've given us a really interesting mix of sources. We've got articles with warnings from, the big names, Geoffrey Hinton, Elon Musk.
Right, the pioneers and the current players.
Exactly. Plus, research looking at AI's, struggles in specific areas like law, mental health, even academic work.
And we also have stuff on what makes humans different, what we bring to the table, and some ideas on how to manage all these risks guidelines from Europe, the U.S.
Good to stack.
It is.
Yeah.
So our mission here is to, cut through some of the noise. We want to explore the whole spectrum of concerns, look at real examples where AI trips up or causes issues, and see what the experts are actually suggesting we do.
It's definitely complex, maybe a bit intimidating.
For sure. But hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer picture of the potential downsides and the really critical conversations happening right now.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, what's fascinating, I think, is just how quickly the whole conversation around AI has shifted. For years, it felt like it was mostly about the amazing potential, the upsides.
Right. The hype was huge.
Totally. But now, as your sources really show, there's this much more serious, widespread look at the risks. That built-in article you sent over, it's striking because it pulls together warnings from people like Geoffrey Hinton.
The godfather of AI, they call him.
Yeah, exactly. And he's openly saying he's concerned, maybe even regrets some of his work because of how fast things are moving. And then you have tech leaders like Elon Musk who joined that big call with over 1,000 others.
One asking for a pause.
Right, a pause on the giant AI experiment, specifically because of, and this is their phrase, profound risks to society and humanity.
Profound risks. Wow, that's a strong phrase to use.
It really is.
And Hinton's comments, about needing to worry now and maybe regretting his life's work, that really hits home how serious some of the key people are taking this.
It absolutely does.
So, okay, beyond that sort of high-level anxiety, what are some of the more tangible risks that the sources are highlighting?
Well, the economic impacts are definitely front and center in several sources. Job displacement from automation, that's a huge one.
We hear about that a lot.
And we're potentially talking hundreds of millions of jobs globally. It's not just, repetitive factory work anymore. The sources point out that even fields people thought were pretty safe, like law or accounting, are looking at significant disruption. And Martin Ford makes this really insightful point. He notes that the lower wage service sector, which kind of absorbed workers when manufacturing jobs disappeared, well, that might not be the same kind of job creation engine this time around.
That really changes the picture, doesn't it? It's not just one sector anymore. It could be paralegals, analysts.
Exactly.
Speaking of law, that Association of Corporate Counsel source you shared gives a really concrete example of AI hitting its limits in a professional setting. Where exactly does AI sort of hit a wall in legal work?
Yeah, it really comes down to the fact that legal work is just so human. AI is fantastic at certain things, like sifting through mountains of documents or doing basic research tasks that are very rules-based, very data-heavy.
Right, the grunt work sometimes.
Precisely. But it struggles, intensely with the nuanced stuff, the context-dependent, often subjective parts of law. The ACC source really emphasizes that legal issues are wrapped up in complex human interactions, interpreting social norms that are always changing.
And applying laws to totally new situations where there's no clear precedent.
Exactly right. Law isn't just about finding the rule in a book. It's about understanding intent, context, human behavior, motivations.
Things AI isn't really designed for.
Not at all. It relies on patterns and historical data. It just isn't equipped for ambiguity or contradictions or the kind of emotional dynamics that are crucial in, say, a negotiation or arguing in a courtroom.
Makes sense.
And the source brings up other critical points too, like the risk of algorithmic bias leading to unfair outcomes and the whole accountability problem when AI decisions are made inside a black box we can't easily understand.
So, okay, powerful for data crunching, check. But it lacks that essential human judgment, the interpersonal skills you need for actual legal practice. That tracks. And I noticed a similar theme, that lack of emotional intelligence, popping up in the source about mental health uses too.
Absolutely. The Church of Mental Health blog you included makes that point very clearly. AI fundamentally lacks empathy, compassion, that deep understanding the things human mental health professionals provide.
And these aren't just soft skills, are they?
No, not at all. They're core components of building a therapeutic relationship that actually works.
And we've unfortunately already seen some worrying real-world examples, right? Like that incident mentioned with the Eating Disorders Helpline chatbot.
Yeah, the National Eating Disorders Association one, that's such a stark illustration of the risks. The chatbot apparently gave harmful advice after they'd replaced the human counselors.
Just awful.
It really highlights the dangers. AI misinterpreting sensitive context, maybe reinforcing dangerous behaviors because it doesn't truly understand. Then there's its limited ability to assess complex conditions with nuance, and of course the huge privacy concerns when you're handling incredibly personal data.
So the argument is AI could be a tool to support mental health care maybe, like with admin tasks or basic info.
Exactly. Your source strongly argues that while it can be a support, human professionals are still indispensable for the actual clinical judgment, the empathy, and making sure care is truly safe.
It feels like a pattern is emerging here. AI is powerful with data, with patterns, but it struggles when things get subjective, emotional, or need deep context.
That seems to be a core limitation.
And this even shows up in academic research, doesn't it? That MIT Sloan source talks about specific limits of generative AI tools in that area.
They do. They zero in on two major problems that are really critical to get our heads around. Bias and inaccuracies. Those inaccuracies are often called hallucinations.
Bias isn't exactly new in AI, though.
No, it's not.
Right.
But generative AI can scale it up and amplify it in new ways. Remember the Gender Shades project? It was mentioned in one source. It famously showed face recognition systems performing much worse on darker-skinned women. That's a classic example of bias training data leading to biased and harmful output.
And it's not just images, right? Text generators can pick up and repeat societal biases from all the text they're trained on, gender stereotypes, racial stereotypes.
Precisely. And the worry with generative AI is that it spits out this text or these images with what they call a veneer of objectivity. Because it comes from a computer, people might be less likely to question it or even notice the bias.
Which could have really serious knock-on effects if these tools are used in hiring or policing.
Absolutely. Potentially increasing risk for groups that are already unfairly targeted.
Okay, and hallucinations. That term itself just sounds kind of alarming. The AI is just making things up, but confidently.
That's exactly it. The MIT source uses this really vivid example from a legal case, Mata v. Avianca. An attorney used ChatGPT for research, right? And the AI just fabricated legal citations, made up case names, even quotes that didn't exist.
Wow, but why? Was it trying to trick the user?
Not intentionally, no. It's not thinking or lying in the human sense. It's basically just predicting the next most plausible word or phrase based on the patterns it learned from its massive training data. And that data includes tons of inaccuracies, falsehoods, and logical gaps from the internet. These models are sophisticated pattern matchers, not truth checkers or reasoners.
So they can generate something that looks completely plausible, totally convincing, even if it's factually wrong.
Exactly, and that's incredibly dangerous, especially in fields like law, medicine, research, anywhere precision really matters.
Okay, so we've hit on job impacts, the limitations in law and mental health, these technical issues like bias and hallucinations. What about some of the other, maybe broader risks that were flagged? Things like societal manipulation or financial instability?
Yeah, the built-in article pulled together quite a few of those. The potential for social manipulation is a big one, using things like deep fakes and highly personalized, maybe biased information feeds. That could impact everything from elections to just what people believe day to day.
Undermining trust?
For sure. Financial markets are also seen as vulnerable because algorithmic trading is so fast and complex. It increases the risk of sudden crashes or volatility.
Right.
And then there's the really profound ethical and safety concern raised by multiple experts about autonomous weapon systems making life and death decisions without direct human control.
That's a scary prospect. And sort of underlying all of this, it seems like there's this concern about transparency, like how do these things even work? Who's responsible when they mess up?
That's a huge point, the black box problem. The opaqueness of these complex models makes it incredibly hard to understand why a decision was made, or to even find the source of a bias or an error.
And potentially, maybe a more subtle risk is just eroding our own human abilities, like critical thinking, if we start relying too much on AI.
That's definitely a concern raised. As we delegate more and more decisions, especially complex or ethical ones, to AI, there's a risk we could sort of de-skill ourselves, diminishing human judgment, empathy, and our ability to navigate genuinely new or tricky ethical situations.
Okay, so given this whole landscape of potential downsides and pretty clear limitations, it's not all just doom and gloom, right? Your sources also look at what humans still bring to the table and how we might actually manage these risks.
Right, it's not just problems, there are responses being discussed.
That MIT Sloan research, for instance, it offered a kind of counterpoint to the idea that AI is just going to replace everyone. They talked about AI potentially complementing human workers.
Yes, and this is where the EPOCH framework comes in, which I thought was really insightful. Instead of just listing jobs AI can do, they flipped it. They looked at areas where AI naturally struggles because of its basic limitations, things like having to extrapolate beyond its training data, or dealing with patchy or biased information, or navigating moral gray areas.
So focusing on where humans excel.
Exactly. It highlights the enduring value of uniquely human capabilities.
And EPOCH stands for, remind me.
Right. It's empathy and emotional intelligence, presence, networking and connectedness, opinion, judgment and ethics, creativity and imagination, and hope, vision, and leadership.
Okay, those definitely sound like things that are harder to code.
Much harder, if not impossible, at least in the way humans experience and express them.
So the idea is that tasks needing higher levels of these EPOCH skills, those are the areas where human workers aren't just holding their ground, but might actually become more crucial.
That's exactly what the research suggests. Roles that demand these human-centric skills seem to be increasing. It shifts the focus from AI versus humans to more like AI with humans. Think augmentation, not just automation.
Augmentation.
Yeah, and it suggests that maybe investing in developing these uniquely human capabilities in people could be a really crucial strategy for the future workforce.
That framing feels a lot more constructive, actually. Okay, so knowing AI has these limits and humans have these unique strengths, what are the sources suggesting we actually do about managing the risks we talked about earlier?
Well, the calls for action really span several levels. Regulation is seen as pretty essential by many. Jeffrey Hinton, for instance, views government intervention as crucial and needed now.
Not later.
Not later. And the sources mention efforts underway, like the U.S. AI Bill of Rights and various executive orders. The European Union's AI Act is often highlighted as kind of a leading global attempt to build a comprehensive regulatory structure. They're trying to categorize AI systems by risk level, for example.
That makes sense, trying to tailor the rules.
Right. And Martin Ford adds an interesting perspective. He suggests regulation should focus less on stifling the technology itself and more on how AI is used to try and mitigate the potential harms.
It seems like it's becoming a global conversation, too. I noticed even Pope Francis was mentioned, calling for a binding international treaty on AI, specifically warning about misuse for things like disinformation and discrimination.
That really highlights how widespread the recognition is that this needs coordinated, maybe even global effort. But it's not just governments. Organizations, companies, they have a critical role too.
What kind of things should they be doing?
Your sources suggest companies really need to establish their own internal standards for responsible AI use. Things like implementing processes to constantly monitor algorithms for bias or errors, ensuring the data they use is high quality and appropriate, and being transparent about where and how AI is being deployed and making decisions.
So making AI ethics and risk management just part of the company culture.
Exactly. That seems key. And there was also that fascinating point about bringing in perspectives from the humanities right into the development process itself.
Yeah, the Stanford research, right?
Yes, they really emphasize this. They argue that involving insights from diverse fields, economics, law, philosophy, history, sociology, medicine, right from the beginning is crucial.
So not just fixing problems after they show up, but guiding the design from the start.
Precisely. It's about guiding the fundamental design and the goals of AI systems so that they're more human-centered, more aligned with broader societal values from the get-go.
So the approach really needs to be multifaceted, doesn't it? You need clear regulations, responsible practices inside organizations, and this intentional effort to weave humanistic thinking into the very fabric of AI development. It sounds like it's about building trustworthy AI, not just powerful AI.
That sums it up perfectly. It's clearly a delicate balance trying to foster innovation while ensuring that AI development actually serves human well-being and preserves the kind of critical thinking and empathy that, well, make us uniquely human.
Okay, so we've taken a pretty deep dive here into a wide range of sources looking at the potential risks and limitations of AI. We've definitely seen concerns covering a lot of ground, from big societal impacts like job displacement and market volatility to the frankly worrying spread of misinformation using tools like deepfakes.
And that persistent issue of algorithmic bias creating unfair outcomes in really sensitive areas like hiring or policing.
Right. And we explored those fundamental technical issues, the reasons why AI can struggle with bias or even just make things up, those hallucinations, which, as we saw, can have serious real-world consequences in fields like law.
Yeah, the consequences aren't trivial.
Not at all. And beyond those practical dangers and technical limits, the sources really pointed to those crucial areas where AI just falls short of essential human qualities. Things like empathy, complex judgment, creativity, navigating tricky ethical situations.
The skills captured by that EPOCH framework.
Exactly, the EPOCH skills, which suggests areas where humans aren't just needed, but maybe we're uniquely complementary to what AI can do.
A different way of looking at it.
For sure. And while the concerns are, pretty significant, we also saw that active conversations about mitigating these risks are definitely happening. From calls for international treaties and government regulations like the ones starting to take shape in the EU and the US,
to organizations needing to set their own standards, and critically, that idea of guiding the tech development itself with diverse perspectives, including from the humanities.
Right. It seems really clear that the path forward with AI isn't just about building smarter, faster systems. It's fundamentally about building responsible ones.
Keeping human well-being and critical thinking right at the center of it all.
Exactly. So here's where it gets really interesting, I think. We know AI has this incredible potential. It could be a tool to solve some massive global challenges, as some experts really hope. But we also have these undeniable risks and limitations we've just spent time exploring.
It's a real tension.
It is. So the question becomes, how do we make sure that the sheer speed of AI development doesn't just completely outpace our collective ability to understand it, to govern it, and ultimately to control its profound impact on our lives and society? What really stands out to us from this deep dive?
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for exploring with us. If you learned something new or sparked an idea, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Got a topic you want Nova and Echo to break down next? Drop it in the comments. Until next time, keep prompting, keep building, and keep doing it with AI.